Very warm welcome to everyone joining today's webcast on unlocking business value with Microsoft's Power Platform. So without further ado, I'll get started with some introductions. My name is Natalie Shepherd. I am a data and analytics consultant here at Thorogood. I'm based in the London office and I'll be bringing this webcast from London. I'm also joined by my colleague Emily, who is based out of the Philadelphia office and is also a data analytics consultant. So myself and Emily have drawn upon our Microsoft Power BI and Power Apps and the rest of the Power Platform experience to bring you today's presentation. So I do hope you find it useful and enjoy it. So let's get into today's agenda. We will begin with a quick introduction to Thorogood, who we are and what we do for anyone who isn't familiar. And then I'm going to take you through a quick overview of the Power Platform, followed by an introduction to the different components. We'll look at their functions individually and then also their functions when used together. Then Emily is going to bring you guys a demonstrative use case with an example of how you can really get the most out of Power Platform in your business. Then we'll wrap up with a quick conclusion. So for those of you who don't know Thorogood, we are a specialist independent consultancy which operates globally within the data and AI niche. And I'm going to go into a bit more detail about what we mean by independent a little bit later. But for now, products generally fall into the general categories of data engineering, data science, and also data visualization. But essentially, our business is at its core helping our customers to really make sense of their data using analytics solutions. That can include data and technology strategies and roadmaps, end-to-end implementation of cloud solutions, user empowerment, such as internal training and such, and analytics services. So our niche and approach is really rooted in very much understanding the business goals of our customers and using the capabilities of technology to actually come and meet those goals. Because of that, I would say our customers and their business objectives are always at the forefront of our approach. So here on the slide are some examples of some clients we've worked with in the past or are currently working with. As you can see, we work with generally very large global organizations, and usually they fall into the verticals of pharmaceuticals, consumer packaged goods, and finance and insurance, but by no means are we limited to that. And now we'll get into some of the technologies that we partner or work with. So as I mentioned earlier, we are an independent consultancy. And just to give a little bit more context about what that actually refers to, essentially, rather than just working with one technology and thus having our solutions slightly constrained to using that software, we actually partner with an array of key tech vendors in the data and AI sphere. And that can include front-end and back-end analytics. We actually find independence really helpful, as having consultants train in a few different technologies I think means that we can really understand our customers, and that's irregardless of their current data landscape. So it doesn't really matter what we're coming into, we still can get a pretty good handle on it. As well as that, I think it really allows us to confidently identify and recommend the best possible solutions for our customers to fit their specific business requirements. And we don't rely on kind of squeezing one technology to fit those needs when it might not actually be best placed for that situation. So obviously for today's webinar, we're going to be working with Microsoft's app offerings, the Power Platform to be more specific. And we've been a Microsoft Gold partner for over 15 years, and they're a very key and close partner for us. We've held Microsoft's Global Business Intelligence and Advanced Analytics Partner Advisory Council seats, sorry, that's a bit of a mouthful, for about that amount of time, which provides us with insights into Microsoft products and services and their roadmap in space. But also we find it a really useful platform to feedback what we're experiencing in the market. So we find that pretty good. We're also partnered with AWS and Databricks, which is a relatively new and exciting technology. We work pretty closely with Databricks. We've done things like presenting at the Databricks Summit, so that's exciting. And Thorogood generally is continuously providing these marketing events, such as this webinar, and also workshops alongside our partners. So this is our business and our passion. And yeah, I think at Thorogood, we really value and enjoy the chance to come and talk about it at these events. So I hope you enjoy it too. Let's look at our objectives for today. Microsoft's Power Platform is made up of several different components, all with quite different functions. And in today's webcast, we're going to start by introducing each of these tools. But what I really want to focus on today is actually the burgeoning potential of leveraging what is an integrated Power Platform solution and how the individual components can really work together and synergize across business functions to deliver what I think is a truly unique genus of business value. And then my colleague Emily is going to add some colour to how that theory comes into practice in a business use case with a little demonstration that really illustrates the interoperability in a hypothetical scenario that she's hooked up for you guys. So you can look forward to that. So the Power Platform is Microsoft's no-code or low-code family of tools, and they can be used individually or all together to deliver a lot of business value within your organization. Any combination of these components can be used together, really. And I think individually, the true magic of these tools lies in the balance of customizability and accessibility. That's what kind of makes them special on their own. But basically, these low-code or no-code environments really offer that rapid and relatively low-cost development, which you don't get in traditional development softwares and solutions, meaning a Power Platform solution can be designed, built, and deployed in pretty much next to no time, which obviously is of great interest to a lot of businesses that are looking for something like that. Another benefit of these tools is that the low-code or no-code interface makes it kind of not too intimidating for a novice or an experienced user to come and alter or build on functions, or even get started with building things from scratch, just because you really get rid of some of that inaccessibility. So I think this is perfect for businesses looking for a low cost but scalable solution with a short lead time and infinite possibilities for customization or alterations. And I think that really aligns with an evolving business. So I'm going to touch on each of these components individually to start with. So we're going to start with Microsoft's Power BI. This is probably the most popular and probably something that you might be quite well versed with already. It's massively accelerated in popularity recently, and we've actually seen that in our Power BI kind of taster workshops that we run at Thorogood. So this is Microsoft's data visualization tool, for those of you who aren't familiar. And I think one of the key and most exciting benefits of Power BI as a data visualization tool is the fact that you can actually connect to a number of different data sources. So we're not talking just things like Microsoft Excel, which is obviously within the same vendor, but also services from other vendors. So for example, we're talking Salesforce or even social media data, allowing you to actually directly transform and cleanse that data and then build up interactive reports and dashboards from this kind of slightly unusual, slightly new, exciting data. And I think you can gain a huge advantage from removing a few steps in connecting directly to those sources rather than going through the traditional methods of exporting the data, putting it into a spreadsheet, and then uploading it. There's actually two kind of arms of Power BI. And the first one is the desktop app, which can be downloaded onto a desktop, of course. And this is actually best for, I'd say, building and developing reports, and you have full functionality. Alongside that, and to build on that, if you are looking to collaborate, software as a service, a web-based branch of Power BI is fantastic for that. It's kind of designed for collaboration, be that with people within your organization or others, business users who you intend to use the applications. Great for sharing reports. However, you do lose a level of functionality in terms of development. You can do some edits and kind of some changes, but we would recommend that predominantly one uses the desktop app for development. So that's Microsoft Power BI. Let's have a look at Power Apps now. So Power Apps is basically a low-code, no-code environment which is used to create business applications. And these applications can be used on mobile devices, such as a cell phone, if you're in America, or a laptop, that kind of thing. And if you think about traditional app development, you would kind of imagine that someone building this kind of stuff would need a pretty heavy coding background to develop the kind of apps like the ones we use on our phone. And what this Microsoft offering really excels at is reducing the expertise and the kind of general manpower, the time taken to create these apps. So I think one of the great ways that it makes it accessible for maybe more novice developers is the option to choose from a variety of pre-built templates within the Power Apps interface, which is really great for someone who's maybe just starting out with this kind of thing. And although this kind of no-code variety is fantastic for people starting out with building their apps, there is also the option to start from scratch. And there is a low-code kind of native code environment. And what this does is that it means developers can use that native coding language to do some really quite complicated things on Power Apps with a relatively high level of customization, but with extremely rapid development. And then taking that time out of development, you don't really need a whole team of dedicated, super experienced developers who are going to spend months on this. You know, you can get that app up and running in next to no time. And as soon as you're reducing the amount of time these developers are spending, you're also driving costs down. So I think it's a great way to achieve a pretty well-rounded and robust application without spending too much time and money on development. And this fast turnaround, I think, also means that developers can actually respond to things a lot faster in this environment. And I think, again, that's perfect for a quickly evolving organization. And also in uncertain external circumstances, which is obviously something we're beginning to see a lot more of in today's world. And that kind of agility is obviously actually really valuable to a lot of businesses. So another really exciting feature of Power Apps is that they actually have the ability to connect to all sorts of data sources, and that includes enterprise data sources. So if you want to surface information from that kind of thing in your apps, such as, I don't know, products or maybe brands within your organization, you can do that, and you can use the apps in a way that's then very aligned with the current data catalog used in the company you work for. So that's pretty cool. And finally, Power Apps have the ability to really integrate into other Power Platform components. And we'll get into some uses of integrating Power Apps with Power BI a little bit later on, which I personally think is super cool. And I think Emily will actually go into some further detail in a demo. So again, you can look forward to that. Let's go on to Power Automate, the third component of the Power Platform. This is actually the new name for Microsoft Flow, and it's used to create automated workflows that improve the efficiency of day-to-day tasks. So think about Power Automate as a sort of series of steps that the application will run through as a result of a trigger. And a trigger could be a button, a set time schedule, or even a business process, such as a change to a document on a OneDrive that leads to sending an email or perhaps even refreshing about a Power BI application. It can actually connect to hundreds of popular applications and services, so you're not really limited with what you can kind of bring into that pipeline of activity. I think this is actually really useful when your kind of work might feel a bit fragmented across a lot of different platforms, even though it's all working towards the same goal. So you can really integrate all sorts of softwares and services used in your day-to-day tasks and processes and create one kind of really cohesive workflow. So I think that's quite a satisfying addition to your day-to-day life. And it also creates a few dependencies in your workflow, which one can imagine to be really time-saving and reduces a lot of tedious admin and maybe risks in getting stuff done as a result of other things. So I think automating that workflow is a really good option for people who find themselves spending a lot of time on these kind of tedious connections between services and processes. So moving on to the fourth and final component of the Power Platform is Power Virtual Agents. And this is super exciting. It's actually used to create intelligent chatbots. And these chatbots are fueled by out-of-the-box AI models. And what this means is that you don't need a super experienced, hardworking team of data scientists who are going to build these models up from the ground. It's a no-code application, so you'll be using kind of a graphical drag and drop interface, and that makes it really intuitive to use. And you're actually able to then leverage the benefits of AI and machine learning without really having to go through the traditional, quite time-consuming steps of creating that model. You can then deploy these models to places where perhaps you might engage with customers. So be that on Facebook or even directly on a website when you're interacting with these chatbots on a website, asking them questions, getting responses, that kind of thing. This is what Power Virtual Agents will be creating. So that's Power Virtual Agents. So although each of these tools is powerful in its own right by name and by design, the move towards embracing interoperability has, in my opinion, really potentiated Microsoft's Power Platform beyond the sum of its parts. And that's really by unlocking the value in combining these components together. I think the advent of the cloud has enabled improved interoperability. But as I briefly mentioned before, we're going to look at the potential of integrating Power Automate with Power BI. This slide illustrates kind of a couple of examples of the business value in actually combining these two tools. And this first example here, triggering a refresh of data from external events, kind of demonstrates how different things that happen in an organization can then act as a trigger in Power Automate to refresh an application in Power BI. So, for example, a manager maybe signing off some numbers somewhere can trigger that Power BI report to refresh. So again, we're introducing some dependencies in an automated way, and we're also just increasing the efficiency of workflow, which is kind of what this webcast aims to do. So that really fills the gap, and I think offers a quite a malleable synergy between these two objects. So kind of something you can change and alter depending on how your business processes evolve. And the second option here is basically the other way around. So we're looking at maybe a KPI in your Power BI report being exceeded, which then leads to a trigger which sends an email or maybe triggers some kind of activity in the business. So you can imagine maybe in a marketing situation, perhaps there's a particular button on a website that's getting a lot of clicks, and a trigger as a certain number of clicks is exceeded can then lead to marketing people being notified that a certain thing is performing well on a website or not performing well at all. So I think it means that you don't lose track of the unfolding progression of things like KPIs, which is pretty useful. And also, if you think about data which is connected to a live source, like that example with the website, that really just increases the potential of this kind of pairing. And I think it really removes some of the manual elements of your day-to-day workflow. And I think also increases the agility of, again, your reactions to changes in organizations or in the outside world. So again, all about kind of lubricating efficiency and making sure you're not spending too much time on manual tasks that really just could be automated. So now we're going to move on to another common pairing of Power Platform components, and something we actually really quite regularly see customers asking for in Power BI is the ability for users to input data directly into the model in a way that is using quite a nice, easy to use interface, relatively simple, not too many steps, basically just not too complex and manual of a procedure. But actually, this isn't something that Power BI handles very naturally. Usually you probably have to change it in an Excel file, like go in and change the data in an Excel file and then load it back into Power BI, which is a bit of a disconnect, has multiple steps for users and just isn't particularly efficient generally. How Power Apps really saves the day here is that you can actually have a Power App that sits kind of on top of a Power BI report and gives the users the ability to enter information, which then feeds directly into Power BI. And I'm sure you can imagine this has huge value potential. So you can imagine wanting to input new sales information or changes to stock in a supply chain setting, new sales forecast information, maybe in a sustainability setting. One could input changes to emission data that you're using to shape targets, and then have your targets reflect that change in data as you input new information, that kind of thing. There's hundreds of ways this feature could add value across infinite business functions in almost every industry. And I think this feature seems like a very obvious way that Power BI could add value. But yeah, as I said, it's just not really something that Power BI really handles on its own. So I think incorporating Power Apps in this way is a bit of a no-brainer and pretty easy to do. So now I'm going to be handing over to my colleague Emily, who's going to take you through a quick demo on this. So yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Natalie. So at this point, we're going to switch over to a use case and demonstration of how we can potentially integrate a few different components of the Power Platform. So let's just jump right into that. The use case that we're working with today, We want to give our analysts or our end users the ability to contribute reviews and commentary to a CPG report. So more broadly, we want our end users to be able to write back to a Power BI data set and see their input reflected in the report. So we're going to use 3 different components for that. We're going to use Power BI to build out that report, build out those visuals and metrics and KPIs and whatnot. We're going to use Power Apps. That's going to give us the ability to allow analysts to enter comments associated with specific visuals or trends that they're seeing. And then we're going to use Power Automate actually for two different purposes in this demonstration. The first, we're going to add a button onto our Power BI report that says, if you click this button, you're going to send out an email to a specified group of users. And that email will contain an extract of your Power BI report in PDF form. The second use of Power Automate in this particular demonstration is to create a real-time updating effect. So when our end users enter a comment or a review in our report, in our Power BI report, we want them to be able to see that their commentary was added pretty much in real time. So we're going to use Power Automate to create that real-time effect. So I have a few slides just to set the stage, and then we'll transition over to some of the more technical components. But again, just setting the stage, the use case here, I've incorporated a reviews visual in a Power BI report. This visual essentially lets report viewers and consumers it lets them leave reviews and comments, and then they can see those comments and reviews reflected in the report in real time. So the components required for this solution, I have a SharePoint list. This is where I'm storing all of those comments and reviews that my end users are contributing through that Power App. I'm using Power BI Desktop to build out my report. I'm using Power Apps to create a feedback form. That's kind of the interface that the end users are going to interact with to enter their feedback and comments. And then again, Power Automate for those 2 purposes, triggering that refresh to create the in real time effect and sending out that automated email. Again, it's going to get a little, not complicated, but I'm going to pull up a few different screens. So I just want to set the stage one final time as to the flow of events that we're going to walk through. So I'm going to start with my reviews visual on my Power BI report. I have a feedback button there. So once the end user says, I want to submit feedback, they're going to be directed to this Power App, which is embedded in my report. So they're going to fill out that form. Once they press submit, that's going to add a new row of data to my SharePoint list. They're entering data. They're writing back to my SharePoint list. Once that new line is added to my SharePoint list, or yeah, I'll leave it at that. Once that new row is added to my SharePoint list, that's going to trigger my Power Automate flow, which is going to refresh my Power BI data set. And then my end users are going to see their reviews reflected in essentially real time. So let me switch over to Power BI Desktop, and we'll start to kind of walk through a few of these components. So I'm in Power BI Desktop, so the authoring tool of the main authoring tool of Power BI. A few things I want to call out here. First of all, this is pretty much a fairly generic sales report. So I have revenue by country, revenue by year, and I have a growth trend here. And then I have this reviews visual. This is where I'm pulling in the feedback that my end users are contributing. And just to call out, I know a lot of our clients and customers are interested in incorporating comments into their Power BI report. If I wanted to do that, I could simply change this visual to a table and then drag in the comment field. So I could actually see the comments that my end users are leaving. But I digress. So the components that I want to call out here, I have this leave a review button. This is actually a bookmark that's going to take me to my Power App. So if I click over here, I've embedded my Power App visual into Power BI. If you can see my mouse, but over here on this visualizations pane, you'll see an icon for Power Apps for Power BI and Power Automate for Power BI. So those are kind of built-in connectors. If you don't see them initially in your visualizations pane, you might just have to go to Get More Visuals and then search for them in the marketplace. But this essentially allows you to either create a new Power App or Power Automate flow for your report, or you can connect to an existing app or report or flow that you've already created. In this case, I've connected to an app that I've already created in Power Apps. So that's kind of how that's embedded. The other thing I want to call out here, this button right here is connected to a Power Automate flow. So to kind of show you how this would work, if I go to more options here with this Power Automate visual selected, and if I go to edit, this might take a minute to kind of kick off. But essentially, this is going to give me the option to either select a flow that I've already created, or I can start to create a new flow for this particular report. Okay, so that's kind of what we're looking at from the desktop, the Power BI desktop perspective. I'm going to switch over now to a few of these individual components. And I'm going to start with my SharePoint list. Again, this is where my Power App is writing back to. So as soon as a user leaves a review in that Power App feedback form, it's going to add a row to this SharePoint list. So that's just kind of setting the context there. I'm going to flip over to Power Apps real quick. This is where I've created my feedback form. A few things to call out. I've established that feedback form as my data source that this app is going to sit on top of. Once I've done that, I essentially used a template from Power Apps to create a form. This form specifically sits on top of that SharePoint list, so I can pull in any field that SharePoint list contains. So review, comment, title, whatever it may be. The other key component here is the submit button. So with this button, when it's pressed, it's going to, if you can see over here in this actions panel, it's going to submit my form and create a new form. So to essentially demonstrate how that would work, to make this clear that this is a demo, I'm just going to all caps. We'll put a 5 here and just testing as my comment. Once I press submit, so that's going to write that back to my SharePoint list and kind of clear the form. So that's the Power Apps component. For the Power Automate component, I kind of have two here, like we mentioned. I'll start with this Power BI refresh flow. So what we're doing here, and as you can see, I was testing a bit earlier this morning. But what we're doing here, I'll open up this flow so we can kind of see what's happening in the back end here. But I'm really just saying when an item is created or modified in a SharePoint list, so when that Power App is writing that new row of data to my SharePoint list, I'm going to refresh my Power BI data set. Pretty simple. It's a very basic flow, 2 steps, but a really powerful feature to create that in real time effect. The second Power Automate flow that I want to call out is this export to a PDF and then email a group of end users. So again, you can see I was testing this morning. Nice, nothing like a little last minute prep. But if I go to edit, so we can kind of see this flow. Basically, I'm saying on a Power BI button click, so I have that button in my Power BI report, I'm going to send an email. That's, again, a 2-step flow, very straightforward to create, pretty easy. I can specify who I'm sending this email to, whether it be a distribution list, a specific person, a specific team, whatnot. I can specify the subject line of that email and the body of that email. To expand show advanced options, you can attach documents here. So in this case, we're essentially attaching a PDF extract of our Power BI report, and that's going out to our users. You could also, of course, just do subject line report has been updated and point your users to the report. There are multiple use cases for this feature. So that's what that looks like. And from the end user perspective, this is kind of where I'm going to close off the demo. I'm just going to switch over to Power BI Service. I've created an app of that desktop report that we were looking at earlier. So this is an app. This is the end user experience. This is how the end user would interact with the report that you've developed. So from their perspective, they can click on this button right here that says alert your team that report is ready. So if I click on that, it's going to trigger my Power Automate flow and send out an email. I don't know if you can hear all of the buzzing that's happening around me, but I've just gotten multiple alerts that my report is ready. So that's working phenomenally. The second component here would be that leave a review feature. So my end user would just click on that leave a review button and enter any information that they'd want to see reflected back in that report. All right, I'm going to switch back to my slides just briefly, just to reiterate what we did. I know that was quite a bit. We added a Power App to allow our users to write back to our Power BI dataset, and that feedback that they're writing back is being reflected in near real time thanks to a Power Automate flow. If this system would also work without that Power Automate component, the only difference would be the feedback wouldn't be reflected until the Power BI dataset was either manually refreshed or once a scheduled refresh took place. So just to kind of sum this up, the story here, there are 4 components of the Power Platform, and we've touched on those in a bit of detail, but the point being each has its primary focus and its primary strength. But when used together, we derive really powerful business intelligence capabilities, and we can create very robust and dynamic systems and solutions. Whether that be embedding Power Apps into Power BI or incorporating Power Automate into Power Apps, or really just any combination of these tools, you're going to unlock more value and more efficiency. So from Natalie and myself, we thank you for joining and have a nice day.